And now on to our next session. It's a panel on GenAI in the enterprise, just continuing the theme of reimagining the enterprise and reimagining AI. We have Mahesh Ram, who's the head of AI at Zoom. Where's Mahesh? Oh, come on up, Mahesh, and introduce your panel, and we'll get started with your session.
Hello. So last night I was drafted into being both the MC of the panel and a panelist. So I'm going to try to channel my inner Oprah today and hopefully pull that off. But I do appreciate the opportunity to spend time with all of you and to have our panelists join us. If don't mind, let's have the panelists join us on stage so we can get right into it. I know we're a little bit behind on time, and so Madhav and Arun and Rama, please join us on stage and grab your microphones. And because we're a little bit behind on time, what we're going to do is what I'm going to do is to ask each of them a question, but in the context of that question, ask them to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about yourself, so we can jump right into the flow of things. So I'll start with my own introduction. So Mahesh Ram, I head up AI at Zoom. I joined Zoom in June of 2022 when Zoom acquired my conversational AI company, Solvi. We were leading players in conversational AI for customer care. We actually built the first large language model on Google's BERT in 2017, late 2017, 2018. So we were far ahead of the market in terms of building LLMs. But the last 19 months at Zoom, I've been leading Zoom's AI companion from zero start when it was just a concept to now yesterday we announced at Zoomtopia that it's now used by about 4.5 million companies, 57% of the Fortune 100. So I'll be spending most of my time on this in my session, or my part of this session, talking about the lessons learned during that journey from zero to those things with AI Companion, which hopefully many of you are using. So I'd like to maybe just begin, and Arun will start with you. So first introduce yourself, and if you don't mind, one of the questions that we talked about in our pre-panel preparation was the concept of dark data and companies not wanting to go outside the ecosystem and share their data. Do you see this as a mental model that's shared by governments and enterprises, and how much will this inform the future strategy of organizations about keeping proprietary data to themselves versus letting it in the hands of the large foundation model companies, which plays on a question that came from the audience earlier. So first introduce yourself, please.
Absolutely. That's a lot to unpack. But first and foremost, thank you so much for having us here. It's fantastic to be here and meet all of you as well. I'm Arun Subramaniyan. I'm the founder and CEO of Articulate AI. We are an enterprise GenAI startup, just like every other startup out there. And our focus is on working with enterprises to enable their core operations to be disrupted with AI, right? And I'm going to paint a slightly different picture compared to what our keynote speakers had to say, partly because there are two, I think, dichotomies happening in the enterprise world, going back to your question. One is what the CIOs can control, and absolutely agree with the speaker in terms of there's more power going there in terms of existing SaaS applications getting centralized. But the other side of the story is the core of operations of the existence of the company itself. For example, take an automotive company. The core of the operation is to design an automobile and then go and sell it. All the downstream activities are definitely getting disrupted in many different ways, but the activity of designing an automobile itself really is where a significant portion of their R&D investments is going, anywhere between 4 to 8%. And that's really what goes back to your dark data comment there. And our existence as a company is predicated on the fact that that data is way bigger than any data that any of these open source models have been able to see or will be able to see. Just to give you an example, in the pharma industry alone, just the top 3 pharma companies, if you just take, like say, Merck and Pfizer alone, they have about 7% of the world's information that has been digitized already. Now just compare that to about 4.5% of the world's information that the internet holds. There's not even a comparison that you can actually go in and disrupt that compared to the data sets that are out there. The other piece of the puzzle that we're seeing, exactly like what Umit mentioned as well, is the pace of adoption of people willing to unlock their own dark data sets for their own use is beyond anything I've ever seen. Like, I can give you examples after examples of companies in countries that have traditionally been at least 24, if not 36 months behind. Like, I'll give you an example of Japan. The first time I visited Japan to go in and have a customer interaction was about 6 months ago. And my take at that point in time was, we'll probably take 2 years before we sign our first contract there. It took us about 3 months. And this was inside an automotive company that typically does not open their data sets even to their own IT teams. And the other thing that's been a revelation that goes back to the darkness of all of these data sets is, even inside large enterprises, this data is dark to their IT teams. Meaning the IT team controls the perimeter, but it does not know what is inside. And the teams that are actually understanding what is inside are the lines of business. And they're actually unlocking that as well. It's a completely new white space that's evolving, which is really what is exciting for us. But it's a dichotomy that is building in companies that is going to only get faster in terms of acceleration.
Thank you so much. Madhav, tell us a little bit about SalesForce. Obviously, many of us did watch Mark Benioff at Dreamforce and many of the announcements, but give us a little bit more color into how SalesForce is thinking about areas like customer care, customer service, as well as customer relationship management, and maybe focus a little bit more on the personalization aspect. So how do you see generative AI and Salesforce, helping to improve a more personalized experience?
Yeah, I mean, is that on? Wait, I think I got it. Now? Okay. Yeah, so first of all, really appreciate being here. Popular time to be at Salesforce, according to our keynote speaker, so good opportunity. So Madhav Thattai, the COO of our SalesForce AI product organization, and we've been really driving this pivot that the company has made over the last couple of years, all culminating in Dreamforce this year. I think understating it would be that this was the most important Dreamforce that we've ever had. I think it was. It was incredibly exciting. And we've had a lot of energy now put around how we think about the future of this company, how we think about the future of the industry, and how we think about the future of the front office. So McKinsey published some very interesting data a few months ago saying essentially 75% of the use cases and value of generative AI that we're going to see in enterprises are going to be in front office applications, which is really where Salesforce obviously has a significant impact. And when we think about everything that the company has done over the last 25 years, there was a question earlier on moats. What have we really done? We have worked with customers across business functions, across industries, to really build and develop their business processes. Sitting on top of incredibly powerful data about their customers, and incredibly powerful, importantly, metadata about how their companies actually work. That's really at the core of Salesforce. If you think of what Salesforce is, it's a metadata platform. It's a metadata engine that really allows customers to then drive their relationships with their customers, leveraging the process that they put in place. That's really what Salesforce is. And if you look back on that, where do we think that this industry goes in the future with agents and Agentforce? These agents are really going to be effective if they understand your business. That is fundamentally what we believe. And in order to understand your business, they have to understand your business process. They have to have access to your data. They have to have access to where and how you communicate with your customers, the channels on which you interact. And really, Agentforce is a culmination of all of those capabilities that we have built over all these years, along with our customers in all these industries. So what do? We announced a new agentic platform that sits on top of our data cloud, which connects across the enterprise to harmonize data across the enterprise. It is flexible from a model perspective. This is one area where Umesh and I might have differing opinions on the role of models. We believe that flexibility is the most important thing for customers today. Models are evolving very, very rapidly. We think customers will use different kinds of models. There's some customers for whom the foundational models are going to be sufficient to run their businesses. There are definitely some customers for whom there is going to be competitive differentiation for models that they want to fine tune. However, the speed at which data and interactions, especially in our world, evolves is probably not going to lead to the most economic use of model fine tuning. And so we want to give customers all of the flexibility to do that. Agentforce then builds on agentic experiences in our applications. So we announced agents in customer service. We announced agents in sales. We announced agents in marketing, commerce, everywhere across the enterprise. And then we also announced this agentic platform on which customers can build and deploy their own agents for whatever workflows they want. So to give you a couple of stats, in the 3 days at Dreamforce, over 10,600 agents were built by our customers. This is spinning up an agent with their data, giving it instruction about what the agent was going to do, and building an agent for their particular context. So the speed at which we can now deploy these new workflows is significant, it's profound. And I think to your question on personalization, each of these agents are grounded in everything that a customer has done on Salesforce for the time that they have worked with us. Their data, their business process, their workflows, their automations. We want to make sure all those things are available to their agents as they deploy them, either facing their own customers or their own sales representatives, internally assisting their employees. But what I get really excited about is as we put this product in front of customers, the kinds of use cases were kind of beyond imagining. You had manufacturing companies thinking about how they would deploy agents in their supply chain. You had healthcare companies thinking about how they would deploy agents for training their nurses and their doctors. In healthcare, we think the relationship, obviously, between the insurance providers and the hospitals is significant, and customers wanted to deploy agents there. So we are really scratching the surface on a profound change across the enterprise and across industries that I think is going to be very exciting.
Great. I think glad that you went deeper and I think took a little bit of a contrarian view to what we heard earlier. I think both perspectives inform the audience as to where some future directions could go. Rama, do you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about NVIDIA? Obviously, synonymous with the infrastructure of AI today, has been the dominant player. What's going on in terms of GPU and software tooling that you're working on that you think will change again and shape and change the future of how generative AI is adopted and used?
Thank you, Mahesh. My name, of course, is Rama Akkiraju. I lead the enterprise AI and automation at NVIDIA, transforming NVIDIA's own enterprise with AI and generative AI. It's been 2 years for me in this role at NVIDIA. Prior to this, I was at IBM much of my career. I was an IBM fellow, CTO, and VP in IBM Watson division, leading the various AI initiatives, including speech development, natural language processing, BERT, pre-ChatGPT, and so on. So that's a little bit about me. Let me talk about more than the infrastructure side of things, which of course everybody knows about what NVIDIA is known for. I'll talk about the opportunity of generative AI and the technology in an enterprise, which NVIDIA's infrastructure, of course, is powering. So in the CIO office, reporting to the CIO, my responsibility is to look at all of the various business functions in the enterprise, including IT, sales, supply chain, marketing, our own operations and business productivity, and identify opportunities for transformation with AI and generative AI. And I can talk to some of the use cases that we are seeing a lot of traction with. One of the primary ones is in chip design itself, which is at the heart of what NVIDIA does. And one of the primary use cases that we have applied it to is to design our own chips using generative AI technology. So talking about customization of LLM models that Umesh was talking about earlier, building on top of large language models, train our models to learn about the chip design process, and created a chip version of the large language model, which is called Chip Nemo by our chip design teams. And that's starting to help our engineers to better design chips, do chip designs, verifications, testing, and all of those things. So right there, it's AI being powered by NVIDIA and being applied to generate and create the next generation chips that will power AI again recursively, right? So that's one example. Of course, code assistance and in general of various kinds, documentation generation, code reviews, code creation and testing. These are all things that we are applying it to, and we're starting to see a lot of momentum there and usage. It's early days still to really say, and Umesh painted a very interesting picture where big companies are starting to let go of their entire call centers already. We haven't seen that yet. We are on their journey. We want to get there, but it's showing a lot of promise. I mean, IT transformation is an area where we apply AI quite a bit too. Of various kinds, automatically providing self-help to employees, so that with chatbots and co-pilots and those sort of things, and assistance to agents who are answering questions for employees within the company, so that they can quickly find knowledge articles and are able to provide assistance, which would have taken maybe 10, 20 minutes. Now it will take them 1 minute, 2 minutes to help employees with the problem resolution. So we're starting to see a reduction of the tickets that come to the help desk, and also the amount of time it takes for agents to resolve incidents. So that's another example. We're applying to our own supply chain as well, where what if scenarios where if there is some disruption to our supply of chips from contract manufacturers in Hong Kong, if it's going to get delayed by 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or delays in Israel because of the issues that are going on, what would be the impact to the customer allocations that we've promised? These kind of what-if scenarios, supply chain planners have to do it day in and day out, and each planning scenario would take up to 3 days, sometimes up to 4 to 5 hours. And if you want to run 15 what-if scenarios, you would go back and come back after 3 days, and then you would have to make a decision. But now, because we have GPU accelerated these linear programming, integer programming, mixed integer programming models, which really make running these what-if scenarios super fast. And even the problem formulation, we are able to do it with LLMs, and therefore this whole process of running a what-if scenario analysis for supply chain planners goes from 4 to 5 hours to 10 to 15 minutes, and that's significant. So you can now make quick decisions about all the changes that are happening, react to your demand and supply allocations and such. So that's an example in supply chain. And we have a number of other projects that we are driving, where we are working with our sales teams to help them prepare better for customer meetings. When they write trip reports, summarize them across all the trip reports that are being sent, so that you have a cohesive picture of what went well, what did not go well, how did the customer meeting go, and so on. So you can think of a number of examples, and we have many irons in the fire. Some of them have made it. Just about a few weeks ago, we've launched our intranet search and chatbot that's powered by generative AI, where employees are starting to interact with it, get all of useful information, and so on. So across the enterprise, we are seeing a lot of traction in some of the use cases. We've deployed some. We are on the journey to others. I would like to get to the point Umesh was talking about. We all would love to get there. It's been an interesting journey. Lot of lessons learned, and a lot of challenges still to address, I would say.
So I'll offer a different perspective. A lot of what you've heard is enterprise focused, right? And the interesting thing about Zoom is we're about a $5 billion company. Half of our business is online and SMB, and half of our business is very large enterprise. And over the last 18 months of spending time with all the CIOs, thousands of CIO conversations we've had on the enterprise, but also talking to lots of small business, what we realize is that there's actually like a 2x2 matrix where the behavior around AI is radically different in each of the 4 boxes. So let me paint that picture. You have SMB type of customers, the small business, the solopreneurs. You have the very large companies. If you think about that as the two columns, and if you think about the 2 rows as being line of business applications, sales, customer care, and pick another couple of those, and then general purpose knowledge worker being the other row. So you have a 2x2 box, right? What you find is that from a perception perspective, small business entrepreneurs online are actually quite fearful of AI. There's actually a lot of latent worries about it. They're all using ChatGPT. You'd think, hey, they're all using ChatGPT. Why are they worried about it? But it's what they don't understand. They don't have knowledge. They don't have expertise. They worry that the data will be somehow taken and used to their disadvantage. So you have a lot of education to do. We talk a lot about intelligent automation. We flipped AI to IA, intelligent automation, to help them think like you can run your business better. We can help you have your business in a box. AI can can be your EA, can come to your meetings and summarize and save you time because you don't have the resources to hire another 5 people. So, you think about that. But they adopt fairly quickly. Once you get over that hurdle, they're willing to try. They're willing to jump in. The enterprise, on the other hand, of course, is what you have to realize is that every CEO of every company is pushing their executive team to have their AI story very, very advanced, because that's what they're being asked at earnings calls with analysts and everything else, right? So they're pushing AI. What's our story? What's our perspective? But meanwhile, the CIO is also being asked to defend the gate. Don't let us end up on the front page of the newspaper for data breach. Don't let our data be misused, et cetera. But keep innovating. Let's have high velocity. It's a very difficult time to be a CIO or a CXO in an organization, which then leads to a different behavior, which has been remarkable for me to watch. The same Fortune 3 bank that we have as a customer, to adopt AI Companion for 150,000 knowledge workers, took 17 calls and meetings with everybody, legal, privacy, security, CIO, et cetera, et cetera. It took 11 months to approve to get everybody to use it. That same Fortune 3 bank took our contact center virtual agent technology and had 3 meetings, 3 weeks, went live in production. Same bank, same CIO, same CEO, same everything. And same thing is happening in sales, same thing is happening in support. So I thought to myself, why is this happening? And I think there's one takeaway for everybody to understand. These line of business applications have clear KPIs that everybody knows. First call resolution, average handle time in contact center. In sales, it's all about making the number and, is the CRM hygiene, is it up to date? And so when the CRO, so I'll take a different opinion than Umesh on this, because in reality, that's not true that the CIO, things can go through the CIO, but when the CRO says, if you don't give me this technology, I won't be able to make my number, guess what the CEO says? What do you need? When do you need it? I'm ready to sign, let's go. Who's holding you up? Let's get all the security, privacy, clearance done. So you have to really think that the adoption curves are very different across these 2 dimensions, this 4-box dimension. And I think whatever you're doing or whatever business whether you're an investor or whether you're an entrepreneur, you really have to understand, this comes back to understanding your segment and the persona of your buyer so well that you can actually speak to the metrics that matter. For the small business, the metric is how do I operate my business more efficiently with fewer people and actually never miss a single, because for a small business, missing that one deal might make the difference between making payroll this month. And for a CRO, they have thousands of calls happening with thousands of customers and they just want to optimize the whole. Very different perspectives. You have to tune your approach to that. So that's kind of one of the learnings I've had, is that it isn't one size fits all, that anything you hear that sounds like, yes, this is a generic thing, really it's not the same when you think about who your buyer is and who your customer is. So anyway, that's just a perspective that I hope provides some value.
Can I add to that, Mahesh?
Please, go ahead.
Thanks for sharing that. That's a very interesting and important perspective. One of the things that we found as we were deploying some of the GenAI solutions within the enterprise, even for individual business functions, sales or supply chain, is if we don't secure the content upfront well, there is a higher risk of sensitive data leakage with generative AI solutions, because they're so powerful and they're able to now summarize, find information that you wouldn't, that you weren't able to find and summarize all that easily before. And so there is an increased derivative risk of sensitive data leakage. Earlier, because the tools were not so powerful, there is a sense of security by obscurity. But now all of the overly shared sensitive data is now exposed, and suddenly all of that comes. So when a finance team sees that their pre-earnings data is now accessible to all the employees all of a sudden, That is not a good situation to be in. So it's an important, generative AI solution that improves their productivity, but unless it is fully guardrailed and protected, and some of these overly shared data permissions are not properly fixed, they aren't comfortable releasing these things more broadly. So I see both sides of it that played out as we tried to do this internally within the company. I totally agree that the best way to go about it is to really go from business case, use case specific, and where there is clear KPIs, business metrics aligned. But even within that, the caveat that I'm adding to your point is that there is still care. There should be a lot of thought and careful guardrailing that should go into it to ensure that even within that domain, data is properly protected. Otherwise, it could run into legal problems, and then suddenly there is a big retraction that might end up happening.
No, that's an excellent point. I think the concern around data is not slowing. It's not getting less. It's getting more because there's more and more data being exposed, as Arun also said. Arun, let's talk a little bit about something a little different, multilingual. So you've done a lot of work in building a product that has multilingual capabilities at a very large scale. What are some of the challenges that you've seen there? Because all of, for AI to be successful, it has to be global. So talk a little bit about the multilingual aspect.
I'll tell you both the good news and the bad news of being multilingual. The good news is you can be multilingual almost at zero cost today. Like pretty much most languages out there, you can start being multilingual very, very quickly. The bad news is you can get there without any guardrails and without knowing the context of being multilingual. Like this is not even having your application being completely internationalized. Right? So you can still have the application being in English, all the buttons are in English, but the inputs and outputs are multilingual. I'll give you a specific example. We were working with a very large auto manufacturer in Germany, one of the top 3, and they have their production line. And in their production line, there are some shifts where workers start entering things in English. Some shifts are in German, some shifts are in Hungarian. Sometimes, even in the same shift, all 3 of them can be entered. When somebody enters a fault, say for example, there is a fault in a paint, there is a nick, or there's a dent, and they need to fix it for the car to go back in, they wanted a system that can very quickly give the technician not only what is happening, but what is the most current thing they can do, and how quickly can they go fix it. And just to give you a sense of scale, that one plant being able to process just 1% more in terms of cars going out was roughly about a $25 million impact per month for that particular company. And so it's not a small thing in terms of changing it. The issue was the same fault when described in Hungarian versus German versus English with the nuances can shift something from being positive to completely negative. Obviously, we didn't know that. And most of the German experts in the plant also didn't know this. So when the suggestions were given, 2 shifts became much, much better. In fact, the overall efficiency went up by 7% in just 3 weeks. That's like phenomenal. They've never seen it. But 1 shift, the actual efficiency went down by 10%. In fact, more defects started popping up. I was like flabbergasted by this until they actually went and found it. They had to find an actual Hungarian expert to figure out what was going on. The same thing that was tagged. Now, this is not innocuous at all, right? So this can lead to some big problems. You need to make sure that you have people who understand the language, especially when you're going into use cases that have a very high impact. Like imagine healthcare, imagine safety critical systems. Like we have a situation in Korea where we're deploying into one of the largest refineries in the world. And all their documents are Korean plus English mixed. And for some reason, I don't know if it's a Korean thing or an oil and gas Korean thing, all of their PDFs, the minimum is about 1,000 pages per PDF. There's some PDFs at 30,000 pages. Just imagine going and processing this through any of your channels today. Just not possible, even if it was English. But the Korean English translation is very funny because the model thinks some of the Korean is actually Japanese. The back end for Korean and Japanese happen to be the same from a linguistic perspective. So if you go look at the text, and unless you are both fluent in Japanese and Korean, you wouldn't really catch what is really going on. So we had to actually go hire linguists to go figure that. So, but the good news portion is still very true. I would never be able to get into any of those applications, even say 6 months ago. Right? I mean, like imagine going into those applications. We're at production beta. We're talking about at a minimum, this particular customer in Korea is about 100 billion tokens processed. Right? That's not the scale that we would have even get tackled before. So.
Yeah, I'll just add a quick anecdote. This weekend, I was talking to a leading scientist who leads a brain lab at Stanford, and he said 40% of the papers that matter today are in Chinese. And so his ability to access those papers is zero today without having somebody translate. With LLMs, he can theoretically go and actually absorb that information that otherwise would be completely hidden from his view. So I think this multilingual capability is more than just a nice to have. It's actually critical for many, many industries and use cases. Madhav, I wanted, you talked a lot about the rapid progression of the foundation models and how fast things are moving and so on. How do you prevent regression? You've built something that works, an agent works really well using a model, but how do you prevent the regression? What are some techniques that you're doing to make sure that you can not have something that was working now suddenly become not so useful?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, I think there is giving customers flexibility and choice on how they want to continue to evolve the model layer, I think is really key. So if you are thinking about different use cases, customers are thinking about, okay, for this particular service use case or the sales use case or marketing use case, these are the kinds of models I want to use, this is how I want to connect it, I think is really important. But I want to go back to something that I think was said earlier. The role of the large language model is an incredibly critical, but it is one piece of this overall puzzle. When a customer is building a use case, they're thinking about lots of things. They're thinking about what is the experience they're actually trying to deliver to their end customer or to their end user internally. That is significant. You mentioned a couple of examples of that. That's really, really important. The most dynamic part of the business is going to be the data that is flowing through that business, and we want to make sure that that data is current, it is connected, it is harmonized across the enterprise, so it is available to use. I would actually argue that is where we see the majority of things that have to fix. So simple examples, I'm using unstructured data for my policies that I need to put in front of customers to answer questions in customer success. To me, the issues there are far more profound than what the large language model is trained on or not trained on. And so we want to spend a lot of time with customers to say, okay, as you imagine your knowledge base, I think Mahesh referred to it as a knowledge lake, your critical content across the enterprise, is it up to date? Is it connected? Do we actually make sure that we vectorize all of that content? We have it available for these agents to use as they are grounding for these particular responses that they're making. That, I would say, is where we really spend a lot of time with customers on making sure the data is current, it is accurate, it is connected. But there's a second part of your question that I think is important, which is, as we think about building agentic systems, remember, you're now teaching these agentic systems based on natural language instruction. You're not encoding the agent in the way you would have encoded a bot in the past. You're giving it a bunch of natural language instructions and saying, hey, these are the topics and skills that you have. These are the instructions you need to follow. These are now the actions you can take on all of the data that's available. That's how the agent is constructed. Within that construct, though, really, really important to put guardrails in place. Natural language instructions that tell the agent, these are the boundaries within which you want to operate. These are things that you should not speculate on. What we find with customers is when you don't do that, it's going to make things up, because large language models will hallucinate. They will make up data where they don't have access to information. So putting those guardrails, we found, is really important. And within our systems, we've built feedback processes, audit and compliance processes for a bunch of reasons that customers can now go back to and look at, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what was accurate, what was inaccurate, where did it hallucinate, where did it not, and now how do we need to refine the agent, potentially the model as well, to make sure that it's being supported correctly.
Great. I know we're a little bit almost out of time, but I want to make sure we get at least a couple of the audience questions. So I know we have several hands up, so we can start.
Thank you so much. Very insightful panel. I'm Sandesh Mali from Ignite BC. The question I have is, in terms of designing the model and then keeping in mind costs, how do you weigh trade-offs between designing, say, an optimal model for your customer and then the cost to operate, given sometimes those two may be inversely correlated?
You want me to go?
Yeah, I can take that. Yeah, I mean, in an enterprise context, if you are using large language models, commercial ones, the costs could quickly add up to multi-million dollars, and the return on investment is not going to work out in the initial few years when you compare the costs to what business benefits you're going to get. But I think one of the things that you have to think about with AI, generative AI, is first think of it as an investment for future. If you start measuring return on investment in year 1, year 2, you don't see it, then don't panic. You have to think of it as an investment. But there are many options at a technical level. I mean, Umesh talked about some of those, you know, starting with smaller models, fine-tuning them with your data for your purpose and see if they'll do a better job. And in some of the domains that we have done experiments on, we've noticed that smaller models that are fine-tuned actually perform on par, if not better, than the larger models, and their latency also tends to be better. So those are good options to consider. And it's not always necessary to fine-tune models, actually. You know, you can accomplish a lot of things with prompts. So start with actually always prompts and see how far you can go with those, and then slowly work your way up. There are other techniques like parameter efficient tuning, p-tuning, which are not as computationally intensive as fine-tuning the models, because they come with the whole life cycle management of the model fine-tuning. Once it's not one time, you have to continuously do it, taking user feedback into account and all of that. So, but yeah, costs are an important one. I'll make 2 points, summarize. Think of it as an investment. Don't always look at it from ROI in the year 1 or year 2. Second, know that there are many different options, and there are probably cheaper, smaller models that might get you as close to the accuracies that you want, and so use them and the alternative approaches for fine-tuning the models as well.
I mean, I think the broader point here that's worth thinking about is, in what situations do you want to DIY your AI? Umesh's perspective was most large customers are going to DIY their AI. Our perspective is that's in fact not the case. As a CIO, you have a decision to make on, you have a core business to focus on, that is your bread and butter, that's where your value is created. How much do you want to spend time building infrastructure at the model layer, at the RAG layer, at the data layer, at the prompt control layer, at the trust layer? Do you want to go build every one of those pieces of that stack? Now, you might decide you're a large company for whom that is existential. That's where your IP is. That's how you plan to control things. What we found is for many, many of our customers, their value is at the business process itself. So their trade-off is really, am I going to spend dollars building smaller models, building larger models, fine-tuning models, or am I going to really make sure my data is connected, my metadata is connected, I'm building the right experiences for customers? So it's contextual, depending on what the CIO is trying to accomplish and what the business owners actually are trying to accomplish. But I don't think that scenario applies for many customers. I would argue for most customers, they probably will not have to go down the road of, you know, constantly managing, as Rama said, a fine-tuning process to go along with their business.
I think we have time. I think we have time for one more question. So I think
that was an insightful panel. Thank you so much, Srikanth Kannan. I'm CEO for a stealth startup, Security for AI. And mostly this question is for Madhav, because from platform perspective, this goes back to the combination of the metadata that you have from thousands of customers, plus the fact that you have enabled 10,000 agents that you mentioned. The question is more around the dark data that the customers, especially the enterprise customers, have versus the data that Salesforce.com, as part of the metadata that you have access to on behalf of the customers. As you enable these agents, how are you able to unlock some of these potentials that are hidden in the dark data, plus you also have access to the metadata? There's a whole evolution of unlocking this white space of the data that is going on, and a general perspective on how do you see this unlocking of the data that provides business value more? I mean, I'm not specific to any verticals or any use cases. There is a horizontal unlocking of the business value that you can do here. How do you see that happening as you enable more than 10,000 of these agents there?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I will say, I gave you a framework for how to think about these agents. And the things you're thinking about are, what role is the agent playing in your organization? What kind of actions and capabilities do you want it to take? And where do you want to deploy the agent? So those are the decisions you're making. For every one of those things, though, what data does that agent have access to and what metadata does it have access to is kind of the most critical question. I can't take actions on loan processing. I can't take actions on health record management if I don't actually have access to that data. So quite coincidentally, a couple of years ago, we had a CDP product that we had for our marketing customers where we had, how do you build a single profile of customers across the business? And what we realized as this particular wave of AI was starting was that product was much, much more important than marketing CDP use cases. So we called it Data Cloud. We launched it a couple of years ago, and we now have thousands of customers that are on it. What Data Cloud really is intended to do is create a harmonization layer between Salesforce CRM metadata and everything else in your enterprise. It's not intended to be a replacement of traditional kind of data warehouse infrastructure strategies. It's not intended to recreate or re-architect data. But how do we make sure we make it very, very easy for customers to connect across any data source, you name it, Google, Microsoft, Databricks, Snowflake, whatever, but harmonize it to your CRM data so that it can be activated in the experiences that we build for customers. If that harmonization is done correctly and with the right use cases in mind, anything that is connected into Salesforce platform is available to these agents. So it's actually really quite simple for customers to deploy any agentic experience on top of these things if that data layer is harmonized and connected. I don't want to undersell the problem, right? I mean, companies and CIOs absolutely have to think about this. It's really the first fundamental question you have to ask as you're trying to build these agents. But we built a lot of platform capabilities to help connect all of that together.
I think that's probably the last question we can take given the time, but I want to thank the panelists for taking us from both the broad view of what's going on in the market down to very specific use cases and examples. I think we could have gone on easily another hour, and I would love to do that at some point in the future. I hopefully will have some time to spend with some of you and take your questions offline, but I really want to thank everybody for that, and thank Indiaspora, I think, for organizing this. And MR, I think the societal impact of this, I think next time we'll spend more time on that. So thank you.
Thank you, Arjun, Madhav, Rama, and Mahesh.